All right, everybody, welcome back. We are jumping into a topic today that I know is on a lot of people's minds right now
Definitely.
with the election coming up, and that is abortion rights.
Big one.
Yes, huge. And specifically, we're going to be looking at 10 states
Right.
where voters are actually going to be the ones deciding, how this plays out.
Direct democracy in action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the potential impact here is just massive.
Yeah, it is.
Like, we could be seeing a major shift in access to reproductive health care across the whole U.S.
Absolutely.
Buckle up. It's going to be a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really fascinating to me about this whole thing is,
Okay.
we talk about the impact and everything, but just the sheer number of women who
Yeah.
could be affected by these ballot measures is incredible. We're talking over 7 million.
Wow.
Potentially. So, it's interesting because it represents sort of a change in strategy,
Yeah. Okay.
for abortion rights advocates where they're kind of, trying to sidestep
Interesting.
the gridlock in
Right.
Washington. Right.
And really focus on these state-level initiatives.
That's really interesting because it really seems like that is where a lot of the action is happening, on so many different issues, not just this one. But
Sure.
before we get into all the specifics of these ballot measures, can you kind of like zoom out for a second
Sure.
and just give us the lay of the land? Like, where do things stand right now with abortion access across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of the big picture is that it's a pretty divided landscape.
Okay.
As it stands right now, we have 13 states that have total bans on abortion.
Wow.
And then 4 more states have these bans that kick in at like 6 weeks of pregnancy, which, a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant at that point.
Yeah. It's
So-
very early.
These ballot measures are kind of happening against this backdrop
Right.
of, already really limited access for millions of women.
Okay. So with that in mind, let's dive into these ballot measures.
Yeah.
Which states are we talking about here? Okay, so the 10 states are Arizona, Florida, Missouri, Nebraska, South Dakota,
Okay.
Colorado, Maryland, Montana, Nevada, and New York.
Got it.
And so, each state's got its own unique situation, but I think there are 2 that really stand out
Oh.
in terms of their potential to really expand access.
Okay.
And those are Arizona and Florida.
And what is it about those 2 states that make them so pivotal?
So the interesting thing about Arizona and Florida is that passing these amendments could actually overturn the existing bans
Oh, wow.
that are in place. And so, potentially that would restore access for those
That's huge.
7 million women we were talking about. And I think, if that happens, it could have this real domino effect
Nice.
across the country,
Right.
really encouraging similar efforts in other states.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier something about legal challenges, and that even if these amendments pass, is there a chance that they could get tied up in court for years?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. That's a very real concern. And I think Missouri is a really good example of that.
Okay.
In Missouri, even if voters say yes to protecting abortion rights in their state constitution,
Right.
there's a good chance that those existing bans
Right.
would actually stay in effect while the courts kind of battle it out.
Wow.
We're talking about potential lawsuits arguing that these amendments clash with other state laws
Right.
or, even the federal constitution. So,
Yeah.
it could be years before this is all resolved. And in the meantime,
Yeah.
it just leaves patients and providers in this real state of limbo.
Yeah. I mean, it's already such a fraught topic, and I think
Yeah.
that just adds a whole other
Totally.
layer of uncertainty and complexity, which is,
Yeah, it's a mess.
yeah. And it's really hard to wrap your head around all the different,
Yeah.
legal ramifications and everything.
Yeah.
But I also think about, the human cost of all of this.
Absolutely.
I remember reading this really heartbreaking story about a woman in Texas
Oh, gosh, yeah.
who nearly died because she couldn't get timely care because
wow.
of those restrictions.
Yeah. And, that's not an isolated case, sadly.
Right.
There have been all these reports linking these restrictive abortion laws
Right.
to all sorts of negative health outcomes. We're
Right.
talking, women facing delays in care, being forced to travel long distances
Wow.
to get the care they need. And in some cases, even being denied treatment for life-threatening conditions because of these laws. So
That's scary.
yeah, I mean, if these ballot measures fail, we risk seeing
Yeah.
a lot more of these really tragic situations.
Yeah, it's a scary thought, and it kind of makes me think about the role that healthcare providers are
Yeah.
playing in all this. I mean, they're the ones who are, kind of on the front lines
Right.
navigating these complex laws and trying to provide care in these incredibly difficult circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, these ballot measures put just immense pressure on healthcare systems. They have to figure out how to comply with these regulations that are constantly in flux. And they're also facing, this potential legal blowback. So it's really a no-win situation for a lot of providers, and it ultimately does affect the quality of care that patients receive.
So given all these complexities, let's kind of walk through some of the possible outcomes here.
Okay.
Depending on how these votes go, what are some of the scenarios that we could see playing out?
So, on the one hand, if these amendments are successful, we could see pretty immediate changes in terms of access.
Okay.
We could see clinics reopening, providers being able to resume offering these services. And, women being able to get the care they need without all of these unnecessary hurdles. I mean, that would be a massive win for reproductive rights advocates. And it could, really pave the way for other states to kind of follow suit. On the other hand, though, I think the worst case scenario is that if these measures fail, it could really embolden, anti-abortion lawmakers in other states, and we could see even stricter bans, further limitations on access.
So a domino effect, but kind of the opposite of that.
Exactly. A domino effect in the wrong direction. And then I think, there's also this middle ground where things get even more tricky. And that's in states like Nebraska, where voters are actually faced with multiple proposals that are sometimes conflicting with each other. And so in those cases, the result really hinges on which measure gets the most votes.
I see.
And it could lead to this really kind of patchwork system where different parts of the same state have completely different levels of access.
That's wild.
Which, just creates more confusion and complexity and really just further inequities in care.
So it sounds like this is really, a complex landscape with all these potential consequences, no matter which way these votes swing. But what can be done, I guess, to mitigate those negative outcomes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And, I think there are a few key areas where action's going to be really important. First of all, I think legal advocacy groups are already gearing up, to challenge any restrictive laws in court. And they're going to be building their arguments based on constitutional rights and precedents and things like that. So it's not over.
Gotcha. So it's not over even if the votes don't go the way.
Not at all.
No.
And then, beyond the legal front, I think public awareness is going to be absolutely crucial. Campaigns that are really focused on voter education can empower people to make informed decisions and, hold their elected officials accountable.
So it's about giving people the knowledge and the tools to make their voices heard.
Exactly. And then finally, we can't forget about support networks, regardless of the outcome of these votes. Organizations that are providing resources, counseling, practical assistance to women who are facing unintended pregnancies or who are struggling to access care. Those organizations are going to be absolutely essential.
It's so important to have those resources available no matter what happens.
Absolutely.
Wow, this has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. It is so clear that we are at
a crossroads.
A real crossroads for reproductive rights in this country. And these ballot measures could really reshape the landscape for years to come.
Absolutely.
And the impact is going to be felt far beyond just those 10 states.
I think it really, begs the question of how will all of this at the state level influence what happens at the federal level down the road.
Good question.
With, federal legislation on abortion. I think it's a question we're all going to be grappling with.
It's a crucial one. And it really underscores the importance of all of us staying informed and engaged and using our voices to advocate for the future we want to see.
For sure.
So thank you so much for joining us for this really important deep dive.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.